All right, it's now 6:01. I'd like to call the Personnel Committee meeting to order. First order of business, pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Second item on the agenda is approval of December 2nd, 21 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Was approved. All right. Third item on the agenda, resignations. And none on the addendum, right? Yeah. So we got Victor Bueno, paraeducator, Alexander Bickerstaff, paraeducator, Margaret Callahan, deputy principal, and Diane Carpenter, second cook cashier. Make a
So
motion.
moved.
And second?
Second.
Second. Motion's made and seconded.
Discuss those? We just.
Any discussion?
What do you want to discuss about?
I don't know.
This
Were there
discussion
reasons?
now.
Okay,
Any discussion?
yeah. Do we have reasons? I mean, is it pay, is it working conditions, is it, do we know why people are leaving?
Mostly life choices.
Excuse me?
Life choices?
Life safety?
Life choices. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Made. Item 4, nominations. We have Ferris Al-Karoubi, system technician. Mark Belanger for teacher. Torsten Bullock, teacher. Philip Reed, PC technician. And Anthony Yerkes, PC technician.
So moved.
Motion to move and seconded. Any discussion?
Just curious, what grade levels are the teacher positions for?
So the nominations, we have middle school, and William Allen is Tory Willow. Oh, BCA, social studies, yes.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5, retirements. We have Nicole Bandera, Dennis Butch Emerson, social worker for Nicole Bandera, Dennis Butch Emerson as a teacher, Marissa Kahlo as a teacher, Clayton McKinney, librarian, Tracy Metropolis, a teacher, Thomas Muzzy, teacher.
So moved. Second.
Question.
Any discussion? Yes, Sandy.
Is it common for teachers to retire at the end of a calendar year versus the end of a school year?
School year, so these resignations or retirements go into effect at the end of the year. So they're working through the remainder of the year, even the resignations,
How do I know that?
because they're under contract. So when they sign the contract, they honor the contract for the year.
Okay. And how do I know that? Because you told me.
Because it's in their contract that the board approves too.
Right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they do have to notify you, and just for clarification, Sal, they do have to notify their intent to retire prior to
That's my question. When do they have to?
February 1st.
February 1st.
February 1st. Thank you.
Good question.
I was just gonna bring up the point that they have until February 1st every year for their contract, and whenever they do retire, they work out the remaining of their current contract.
Any other questions? Discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay.
PC, connected.
Next item, item 6, stipends, Patrice Hunt, Ambassador Coordinator.
So moved.
Motion moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion?
Yeah, what's the amount on that stipend?
Do we have an amount?
Wow.
Okay.
Who are these?
The Ambassador Coordinator,
Say that again?
do we have an amount on her stipend, Patrice Hunt, for the Ambassador Coordinator?
I think it's $1,500. It's through the Perkins grant though, so it's not coming out of the operating budget.
What is that position involved? What is it?
So each of our CTE programs has an executive board, so if Mr. Nyhouse is the auto teacher, he has people from Honda, Toyota, the Cadillac dealership, they sit on an advisory board. So now we have one person, it's a teacher at our school, that works with all of these advisory boards to schedule meetings, to make sure we have community engagement. She actually recently worked with our students. We had all of the middle school students from Rochester, as well as the Falls School, go through the CTE programs recently on a tour. That ambassador worked with all of the student liaisons to give the tours, to make sure the right talking points happened, organized the whole day.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 5-year plan. So, at the 5-year committee, the chair, Mr. Bollier, did an exercise that we'd like all the committees to participate in. And that is looking at our specific committee and trying to write down the top 3, correct me if I'm wrong, the top 3 priorities that we'd like to see on the 5-year plan out of our committee. And you want to allude on that at all, Mr. Bollier?
The focus of this is that the board would, in each committee rather, is going to put together a list of what they feel they want to, where do we want to go in 5 years? This is a short-term, mid-term, and long-term goal. Some will have a domino effect into those. This will then precursor to a community meeting and also a school administration meeting to then have a master giant list in which the 5-year committee will then work through, help prioritize, and bring back to the committees for our working projects over the next 5 years. We already have a 5-year plan in place now strategically. How are we going to get there is what we're building, and which will then evolve us to have our next 5-year growth, or 5-year strategic plan from there.
So I'd like to ask that all the members of the Personnel Committee take a moment and write down basically the top 3 priorities that we'd like to see out of personnel. If we present it to 5-year. You don't have to be, Mr. O'Connor.
One, I'd like to, staff retention, I think should be one of our priorities.
And that we have all of our positions filled.
All right, so the way we did, we wrote down our own 3, and then went around, but I'll show you what I had at that committee, was staffing, was hiring and maintaining basically our hiring for our vacant positions, and maintaining the staff that we do have, retaining, retention. And then the other was basically contracts, looking at pay and retention for both teachers, hourly employees, again, recruitment and retention. So in the contract process, whether we, in 3 to 5 years, looking out in the contract specifically. And then under mental health, I know we've talked about it again, it's kind of the staffing shortages, the psychologists and mental health specialists, they would keep talking about finding a way to get them into the budgeted positions or you know, hiring them and getting them on staff, so. Audrey, do you have any
Well,
specifics, or?
I just agreed with the full staffing,
Yep.
staff retention, and then professional development opportunity.
Opportunities, or just,
Professional development, yeah.
okay. Tom, do you have anything, or, other than?
Yeah, so
I mean-
my three would be staff retention,
Yep,
staff recruitment strategies.
yeah.
The hard part is I got like sub-bullets underneath each one of those. so-
No, I hear you, and, yeah, I mean, you can share, so basically we're gonna go back to the 5-year, but at the end of the day, it's our committee, at this level, we're gonna try and work through, how do we gain it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep,
So that it's not
kind of establish
lost
goals
into
and
5-year
objectives.
as well, exactly, so,
Okay.
you know, focus for us, so, go ahead.
Okay, yep, so, recruitment, retention, staff strategies,
Yeah,
and then staff expansion. And that speaks kind of to what you're saying, like, maybe more mental health support.
yeah. Let's see.
Anyone else?
Look at any thoughts, ideas?
No.
Still getting into it again. School psychologist is one I definitely, one of the things is, we talk about staffing, but it seems like we are always looking for pairs. And another thing we're always short on is substitute teachers. It seems like we're really having a hard time, especially in current climate. I know we're talking about 5-year right now. We keep dreaming that this is gonna go away, but when? So finding ways to encourage people to sub for our district, and so I guess filling some of these, you know, it's not a teacher, so, you know, teachers are top level of what we need, but all these other positions are still very important, to make sure we're staffing to support our teachers.
Absolutely.
And something, try to see if we can get more people interested in.
Sandy, you have any? Nothing else? No. All right,
So I
so,
just have a real quick question. Kyle, given the workforce challenges that the state's seeing across the board, are you seeing any uptick at all? We are in some areas, but I don't know if like school districts are or not.
No, I think everyone's in the same predicament. To Matt's point, actually, I've seen some very unique substitute proposals recently in different districts. And I know we just really revised the pay grade for pairs recently, but some districts are doing some other things that we could consider. So I'll try to bring that to a future personnel meeting so you can see some of the things that, again, they do cost money, but again, maybe it's helping getting people in the door. So I'll bring a couple of those proposals forward.
anyone else, sir?
Yeah, I know I'm not on the committee,
Yeah.
but if you don't mind if
No,
I share.
absolutely, good.
I think that there'd be a need for one LEA position for elementary schools. Looking into that, if there is a need. And then a drug and alcohol LIDAC counselor.
Dave, I have a question of Kyle. Kyle, one of the things I've seen in the Boston Globe is that Massachusetts is hiring back substitutes without a penalty on their retirement system. Is that something we could do individually, or would that have to be state legislation? or
It
something?
was state legislation. We were hoping that they were gonna do that earlier in the pandemic, to be honest with you, because even the year that we had our first bout of the pandemic and we snapped out, we had teachers that had planned to retire, because again, you heard February 1st, they have to notify us, and they did, but then they started thinking, well, maybe they could come back, but the penalties for that were too prohibitive for some folks. and the state hasn't let up on any of those measures.
Okay. I mean, I think it's working in Massachusetts, but, you know,
Well, every bit helps.
a lot
I
of
mean,
retired
that,
people are coming
yeah.
back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah.
We're seeing that in other areas too, where they're incentivizing people to come back who are retired and not penalizing them, so.
So I know we're kind of starting into our budget season as well, but between now and the next time we meet as a committee, try and categorize, you know, what I've got for a list right now, hearing y'all, is staff retention, overall recruitment and retention across all levels, you know. Staff expansion, especially the mental health psychologist, the LEA position, drug and alcohol, LIDAC counselor, school psychologist, pairs and subs. Start trying to prioritize, I guess, high priority, medium priority, low priority, as far as, you know, if we wanted, you know, if we think that we definitely need psychologists, that's high priority, you know, try and figure out that's, you know, the one-year goal, if you will. How do we get that into the budget? Because that's our greatest need or you know, desire. So between now and next meeting, kind of come up with the priorities of those, so we can start trying to figure out how we can adjust the budget or the staffing and start trying to achieve some of these goals that we're trying to go to. So. Any other questions pertaining to 5-year? If you have anything on 5-year that you'd like, obviously it's open to all people. And I don't know how well everybody's attuned to how 5-year committee is now. It is the chair of the other committees that are members of the 5-year committee. So if there's anything you'd like, you know, personnel-wise, like I said, we did this exercise as far as the chair of the committees come on. And safe to say we all want the same thing. You know, those of us that have been here for at least a couple of years have recognized, we've talked about it. It's a matter of how do we achieve it.
And just so everyone knows, the 5-year plan is listed in 3 different areas on our website. So it's under links for parents, it's under links for staff, and it's also listed on the school board page. So it's in 3 different areas. It's the same plan, 3 different spots, just depending on who's going and looking for certain things. We felt it was important to put it in a couple different spots.
All right. Any other questions pertaining to that? Moving on. Number 8, public comment. Do we have any public comment? No public comment. 9, other. Kyle,
Yep.
paras paid on remote days.
Yeah, and I want to thank first Ms. Filer for coming. She reached out to me after the last school board meeting. I think concerns were brought forward by folks that evening because people had reached out to them. I think it's important that we vet all the information we got because a lot of the information that was given to you or may have been given to you was not entirely accurate. And Ms. Filer can chime in at any point in time. We have a contract with our paraprofessionals, but we also have a memorandum of understanding that was signed and continues to be in effect with both teachers and paras that outlines how we handle work on a said remote day. That goes back, I think, if I remember correctly, the first year it was formally adopted was the either 17-18 or the 18-19 school year, when we called it blizzard bags, if everyone remembers that.
I found 18-19
Yeah.
today, for sure,
Yeah.
so.
And it outlines essentially that certain jobs, right, do work remote, okay? Because again, if you just think about it for simple, like, ease of understanding, we issue teachers a laptop. We don't issue every paraprofessional a laptop. We actually don't issue any paras laptops. So if I said people could work remotely and Tom had a personal laptop at home, but Linda didn't, and they were both paras, it's inequitable. Linda can't do her job and Tom may be able to do his job. We have to understand, we have a signed agreement that just really says this simply. paras make up time that they didn't make if they want to do that. It's not required, they do not have to make up the day if they don't want. But if they do want to make that up, they simply go see their supervisor, they work out a plan. And Ms. Jur is here, she could probably share plans. We had a teacher workshop day the other day where paras were not required to be on site. But if I were a para at McClellan and I asked Ms. Jur, can I come in to make up my time from the other day? I'm sure Ms. Jur would have had plenty of work for me to do, so I can make up my time and punch in that day. But again, remember, that's a non-work day, so Ms. Jur would be telling payroll that I was coming in, they would then allow me to clock in and clock out. So there's a lot of logistics involved, but again, to simply put it, no one's being put at a deficit, everyone's allowed to make up their time should they want to, and it's all part of the agreement. And we have a long-time paraprofessional who's a wonderful person. She reached out, I think, to all of you, and she included me on it. And she basically said, we have an agreement, and if we want to change our agreement, we'll bring it up at negotiations, which is next year. But she basically said, we're following the agreement. And so I want to thank her for doing that. And we're always happy to hear feedback, but again, we're all working under what we currently have in place. And then if we want to modify it, we'll do that when we sit at the table for negotiations. Any questions for myself or Ms. Myler?
So, is there a time frame for them to make up in that, so if?
So on a delayed day, yes, it has to be within 2 weeks. Like tomorrow, they literally could take the rest of the year if they wanted to. I mean, most of them don't.
But it has to be within the school year?
School year.
Within the school year, yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, so they keep track of, I need 8 hours or whatever from
So,
day
yeah,
to day.
and again, there's too many models to describe, but again, in that example, I would go to my principal, Ms. Jur, and I would say, in order to make up my 6.5-hour day, I'm gonna come in 30 minutes early and let's say stay 30 minutes late for the week, and I'll make up my time that way. Are you okay with it? And then she'd say, yep, what are you gonna be doing? And again, it's a collaborative thing. Ms. Jur just doesn't tell me what I'm gonna do. She says, what do you need to catch up on that you didn't do the other day, right? And then Ms. Jur might have some additional things for me to do to make sure that I have work to complete.
Mr. Pucci, and many offices have a book that literally, if I'm a para and I normally come in at 8:30 and I came in at 8 today, put my name in, put 8 o'clock, go about my business, and then the secretary either afternoon or the next morning goes in and adjusts their time clock to reflect that. Because they can't technically punch in early. And I looked at the one I got it today, and Tammy's got little red checks next to all the ones except for today that she's adjusted already. So that they've made that pretty simple. It's right in the office.
The long and short of it, the system's not broke. I mean, we're working within the parameters and it's working.
And I think the other thing, and Ms. Feiler and I spoke about this the other day, it's important to realize when we sit down and we negotiate that, she and I just don't arbitrarily say, this looks good, and we sign it. She has to take it to all of the paraprofessionals and teachers. They voted on this. So then they said to her, you can sign this, right? And then that's the agreement. So this isn't something that anyone just arbitrarily says, this is what we're gonna do.
Right.
It's been vetted, it's been, in place for quite some time.
Any other questions for Kyle on this?
Yeah, so tomorrow, I assume will be one of those off days. I don't know if
It
we
is.
called it or
It
not,
is,
but,
yeah.
okay.
Remote.
So
Remote right now.
how do they make that up? They can come in anytime between now and June 16th, or whatever our last day is,
Yes, it is. Yep,
and make it up that way?
correct.
Okay, okay, they don't have to come in certain days or certain hours. Okay.
But is it accurate that knowing the forecast, they could have put in for like a planned sick day or whatever it is? I don't know how we count.
Well,
how we say
right,
that.
that was
The
the other-
memo that I shared, and it was something, what we wanted to make sure people realize is, because part of people's contracts is they have sick days, right, they have personal days. But again, what, in past, okay, if we had a day that was a snow day in the past, right, it became a non-work day. So someone couldn't take the sick day on the non-work day, right? So if someone did put it in for that day, in the morning, it would be backed out by payroll. So what we wanted people to realize is, again, I have kids and they have appointments all the time, so I might put in a day, 3 weeks ago, that my son Eli has an appointment tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's a remote day. Technically, I'm not supposed to take one of those days, but if I did it, as Matt said, we said 24 hours is enough time that we'll honor the day, but you can't wake up tomorrow, get the call, and say, oh, I'm not coming in, I don't need to make up my time, and I'm gonna use this benefit.
Roughly how many para positions are there?
Over 300.
About 240.
So is that positions or how many are filled?
And they're managers, no, that's total number, so we have some that are filled and we have some that are open.
Okay.
So,
Does that include food service?
Food service is not a para.
Oh, that's right.
but they're all, those, just to follow up on that, they're all managed, lack of a better way of saying it, they're managed at the school level, at each school level. So those positions, it's not a broad base, you can make up the time is broad, but how they make up time is the individual school responsibilities. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
So,
We
no
all
schools,
follow the same contract, same work
they
time.
follow the contract as the umbrella,
Yep.
but how they do it is based on the individual school. Is that fair assessment? All right, any other discussion on this? All right, Rochester UNH collaboration.
Mr. Toddy's here for other,
Oh.
so we're gonna kick him off. Mr. Toddy, I'm gonna kick you off the screen for a second. We'll come back to you in a moment. To Mr. O'Connor's point earlier, we are working, and when I say we, Mr. Gregoire and I have been talking about our staff shortages for some time this year. Each month, there's an update of missing staff that we have in the budget, and then that, obviously, as you heard, right, impacts our teachers and students when we aren't able to fill them. One of the things that we have close to us is the University of New Hampshire. And what's interesting in trying to talk to the University of New Hampshire is students in their programs have certain hours they need to complete in order to become a credentialed educator. As you may remember, when you went to college, sometimes you had a car, sometimes you don't have a car, right? So you may be limited to transportation and where you can do your student teaching. So for example, in talking to the University of New Hampshire, the lion's share of students at the University of New Hampshire go to the Oyster River School District because they can walk to 2 of the 4 schools in that district from campus. And they don't need to drive, they don't need to take public education, transportation. So we said, okay, we know we're limited, but we also have great opportunities here in Rochester, and we want to try to work with the university. So looking at what we currently have is we have shortages, right? We have 59 open positions, and roughly half of those are para positions. And when you sometimes see that we've hired someone mid-year, that sometimes is that we have had a person that's para at one school maybe want to be a secretary at another school. So really, it's not a net gain, right? It's really, this school had a staff member, now they don't because that person went to another school. So we didn't really grab anyone, right? And this happens, believe it or not, in the summertime as well. When we're hiring, quite often we have paraprofessionals who put themselves through school. So I get certified in the summertime as a teacher, and I was a para at William Allen. But there's an opening at McClellan. So now, Mr. Gilpatrick is down a staff member because I'm going over to McClellan because that's where the opening was. And again, that's just the nature of hiring. But what we want to try to do is get some external candidates. So our hope right now is to establish a relationship, and I can't thank Mr. Gregoire enough, and we'll open it up to questions at the end of this. And I'm not going to read every single one of them. But in essence, you have 4 years of undergrad, and then there's 1 year of a master's. Master's is an intensive teaching program that year. So essentially, they'd be placed, if I was, let's say, a 5th grade teacher, and Matt was doing his hours, he would be placed under my educator license. So I'm an experienced educator. Matt would be now kind of my mentee, if you will, working with me to fulfill his student teaching hours. But that's year 5, okay? What we need to do is we need to grab the kids when they have to do 260 hours over the 4 years that they're in school. And again, based on student schedules, it could be that freshman year, right, you have to do all gen eds. But second semester, maybe you have the opportunity to do it. So we need to try to figure out a way to get you to do some of your hours with us. Knowing that we have openings, one of the things we talked about was, would it be a benefit, and could we talk to the university and possibly hire that person as a paraprofessional if we had an opening? So if we had an opening, and I'm a student at UNH, and I could walk to the middle school in Oyster River and not get paid, could I come to Rochester and get my hours, but maybe make a little money? Now, the dean of that program said that $7 an hour makes a substantial difference in the life of a college student. Because they're trying to, again, feed themselves sometimes, they're working odd jobs, still trying to do their studies. So if they could combine those two things and focus, that would help immensely. The other thing that it would do is it would put them in our pipeline. So essentially, if Sarah were that girl who had done hours all 4 years in Rochester, or even maybe just 2 of the 4 years, but in that last year she was doing her work and she's on a para contract, she's an internal candidate. When we post jobs, she could see those jobs early, like we always post 5 days internally. And again, if she's worked with, I'm just picking on Ms. Jerk because she's here, but if she had been in that school and she said, wow, she did an amazing job in 2nd grade when we had her intern in the 2nd grade, I'm going to ask her to apply for the 2nd grade opening. And she'd be applying early, before she graduates, before she starts looking at other districts, right? And that's what happens sometimes. You know, in our municipal budget, we don't have it approved sometimes until June. And if we don't post our jobs historically, and we'll talk a little more about that later in the meeting, as late as we've done, sometimes late April, May, that college student has graduated in early May and has already accepted a job at the end of May or beginning of June, and we lost out on that person. So this might be a way to, again, recruit, attract, retain. The other thing Mr. Gregoire is going to be doing, he's going to be going to a college fair. So again, we're establishing that relationship. They'll know who we are, talk about, again, not just the ones that are coming out, but also the ones that need to do hours. So again, it's all contingent upon if we still have open positions, obviously. But if we do, it would probably be a net gain on both sides, the students, the university, and us, to enter into this collaboration. The other thing that they'd like to do is, if we were to institute something like this, they actually want to do some postdoctoral research on it to see, does this help students that enter the educational field stay in education? Because right now it's about 4.5, 5 years we lose teachers. They decide that this might not be for me, largely because research says they didn't get enough mentoring. They didn't have enough support. If we can bring them in earlier, we can support them longer, maybe they'll stay with us longer as well. So, excuse me, and again, the 5th year students, we would already have a pipeline to those Ed 500 students. So when I have to do my year internship, again, if I had worked with Ms. Harrington, I might request, can I go back to be in her classroom? So what we'd like to do is start asking all of our principals who have, in the credential is the experienced educator license. So you have to be a more veteran teacher with an ELL or EEL credential to accept an Ed 500 student. But then we would have those people right in our pipelines. So we're hoping to do that, and again, starting as early as next year, perhaps, after we do the job fair at UNH. So at that, I'll just open it up to questions for myself and Mr. Gregoire.
Any questions?
Well, how does this differ from the usual program that they've had for 100 years of a student having, under their bachelor's degree, coming in and having to do like teaching for a semester or something like that?
So this is all traditional work. The model at the university has not changed. What we're suggesting is that because of where we are, we're a little further away from the university, that we lose out on not having students come to us regularly to see how great Rochester is. So if we're able to put this program in place and a student gets to choose, I can go do my hours somewhere and not get paid, or I could go somewhere and do my hours and get paid. Maybe they're going to pick us, and again, once they get here, I'm pretty sure they're going to really love us because we do wonderful things here. Then they might want to come back. And again, the other thing that it does is, just because they're in our pipeline, it doesn't necessarily we need to take them, right? Ms. Jur might have me for 2 years at McClellan, and then I apply, and she says, yeah, we're going to stay away from Kyle. We've had 2 years of experience with him. We're going to pass on him. but that's a good thing for both people. So that's what we're hoping to do.
My second question is, do we think there's a big group of students at UNH that are looking to get a master's in teaching?
Yeah, there's about 60 kids every single year that they need placement.
About 60?
60 kids, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When I did my 5th year, we were allowed to sub as well, but not too often. But we were often used as a substitute, especially if our cooperative teacher was out, we would sub for that classroom. But there were times we'd sub in other rooms too, but it was a balance. You couldn't do it all the time.
Do we have, fiscally, do we have that in the budget, money in the budget to be able to pay for that?
Well, I think we do only because right now, we have over 20 pairs that we haven't hired this year. And historically, we've always been between, I would say, 10 and 14-ish pairs that we haven't hired. So even if it were just 10 kids every year, because we haven't hired 10 pairs, but we could get 10 students to come through and learn about us and see how great we are, and then want to come back, that just increases our candidate pool when we do have an opening.
So it kind of comes from that line?
Yep.
Okay.
So, Carl, do we currently have any college student teacher that, historically, what do we get? Do we get any every year?
Very few. We have some doing some work right now with some ELL students at McClellan, but we don't have a lot, not nearly as many as I'd like to have.
This is enticing.
Yep.
I think it's great idea, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Out of the box. Thank you.
Do we want this at the full board presentation, or have this presentation at the full board?
Or you could just make a motion to pass it along to the full board for them to recommend us doing it, and then what that would allow us to do is, as we go to UNH, we say we have our board support in doing this, right? And that way, hopefully, we can attract. And we'll talk a little more about some of the other related items.
Well, we'll make that. I recommend that we move the Rochester UNH, or Rochester School District and UNH collaboration plan to the full board for review.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Moving to the full board? Thank you. No opposed? I didn't think so. All right. Moving on. C, 2023 budget review.
So that's Linda, so I don't mess up the number of people we have. Right?
I do apologize.
No, that's fine, Linda, that's why I have
Typically
you.
don't-
That's why I have you, Linda, you gotta keep me straight.
We let the masters do their thing.
Yeah.
So I'll just do an overview as to, this is a very large portion of the budget, but it is going up $1,879,000 or 3.6%. And again, our guaranteed maximum rates for health insurance is 5.2. Our dental premiums are going down 1.4. And basically, all the what's included in here is everyone's step increase, and then potential, some contracts go 0 to 3, so 3% has been budgeted for those areas. Again, I think I mentioned at the presentation, to get us to full-day kindergarten till 3/3/15, the $408,000 is in here. That's including 5 new teachers, and then bringing all the kindergarten paras from 27.5 hours to 32.5 hours. That brings them that extra 45 minutes in order to conduct that business.
Does that make them eligible for benefits? For like health insurance and?
Actually, some of them are eligible for benefits because they've been here 10 years.
Oh,
It really depends on the contract. But yes, after 30 hours, now they'll be at 32.5 hours, but not eligible for New Hampshire retirement system.
Okay.
I know this is a lot to go through. Any specific questions for Linda at this point? It's gonna be a working document for the next month plus. So.
I think historically, at the first meeting, we kind of hold off on making
Right.
recommendations on personnel because it's the last thing we want to cut.
Right.
And kind of wait a little bit until we see how the budget shakes out, and then we'll know better.
Oh, absolutely. I was just gonna say, that it's a lot to digest. I'm not looking for any motions as far as where to adjust it right now. I'm looking for just any other general questions that maybe she can get us information if you have a chance to. Just go with.
There was one question brought up at the board meeting regarding the budget. Comparatively, the dollar amount for full-day kindergarten, in lieu of that, how many of those positions that have not been hired yet, or the positions we have lost over the years that we have not rehired, could we bring back, and which ones? That would obviously be a combination of you and Linda. So, not looking for an answer, but I just want to convey that request was there, just to make sure that's reviewed. And if there's other savings down the road, as we all review this, maybe everything can happen in a perfect world.
So Matt, are we looking for kind of different scenarios of
Yeah, so it's
what
in
the
the
cost
form.
for full-day kindergarten? What can we do position wise for that type of money as well?
Yeah, like, we have that list of positions in that presentation, so how many positions we have cut and we haven't replaced.
Yeah.
Of those, Kyle Dean as well, you know, yeah, full-day kindergarten's great, but I have 408,000. We could bring back 2 or 3 of these other positions that actually we have a bigger need. Obviously, that'd be a recommendation we're looking at to see if it makes sense. Or at least have the scenarios with the recommendation of.
No, I like it, because there's a lot of concerns with the idea of full-day kindergarten that should be discussed, so.
I think construction would get more to that, or maybe that's recommended or something.
All right, any other discussion on the budget? It's pretty clear, just kind of start leafing through it. If you have questions, reach out to Linda, Kyle. Moving on to discussion regarding Chamberlain principal position.
So as you may recall, we did have an interim posting that was there through, just through the new year. We did not get a pool whatsoever. So my recommendation right now is to post effective tomorrow, and put that it's July 1 effective date, and that hopefully we can get the process that I reviewed, which includes, you know, staff input, parents, the board, everyone involved in the process, and hopefully have that person before the April school board meeting, if possible. Because if we get out early, this is roughly the time that people are starting to look.
Do you need a motion for that, or?
You can if you want, you don't have to. It's-
Well, we can't
Yeah.
make any action at the committee levels.
Yeah. It's really just a posting, I mean, really, the one that, and.
And that's, is that a 30-day post, or what is that?
No, we would post until higher.
Till higher?
Yeah,
Okay.
until higher, but we would probably put, we want, you know, applications probably by,
I mean, it's gonna be a closing date of some sort,
yeah,
right?
we'd probably put, you know, first week in March, and then we would be doing screening, and then we would have people come in mid-March, and then try to get people through that process and get them before the board in April. May for sure.
I mean, it's not outside the normal what
Nope.
we do, yeah, so I
Nope.
don't think it's.
Yeah, procedurally, it's an interim position, you're gonna have to fill it by July 1 anyways, whoever applies, so procedurally.
It's just an update.
You're just
you know.
updating the
Yep.
committee.
Ms. Herring?
Any timeline on deputy principal position, when that would be posted?
Well, that's, I'm gonna talk about that in F.
Oh.
I can share it,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
You wanna do E?
Good.
So E is federal grants manager, and as you know, Steve Leclerc recently retired. He's going to be back, you know, periodically between now and the end of the year to just make sure things stay in line, and as we transition a new person in. As you know, Mr. Gray was hired as federal grants manager earlier in the year through the ESSER grant. But as he was an experienced principal and we needed someone, I transferred him to Chamberlain. But we're going to be posting that position. And again, trying to follow the same aggressive timeline. If we post tomorrow, that hopefully we get someone in place for the April school board meeting.
Any discussion? Questions? And job posting date?
So, if you recall, most years, we don't post jobs until we have a very strong handle on the budget, which means right now, we have to give the city the budget by the 25th of March. And then they have some time to figure out what they're gonna do if they need to adjust our bottom line and whatnot. So really, most years, we haven't really gone out to hire positions until probably mid-ish April, on a good year. Sometimes it was later than that, when we weren't sure where the budget was gonna be. My recommendation to the board, after you heard Linda's initial overview of the budget, is that we go out to hire on all positions that are currently included in the budget that have a retirement or resignation. So, Ms. Harrington just mentioned the deputy principal at the high school, recent resignation. That's in the budget. We know we need that position next year. I think it would be unwise to wait until we finish the budget process to go post that, because those administrators would have found another job. So my ask of the board is that, working with Linda, we look at the retirement and resignation list. We post those positions for the effective start date of July 1, so that our principals can start hiring and going through that process as soon as possible.
Makes absolute sense to me. There's no vacancy coming, the budget's already, or that's already there. The likelihood of, we haven't cut positions in a number of years as far as
Well, and if you think about it,
likelihood of it.
even if the bottom line had to get adjusted, like what we're just over, like by $106,000, let's say that the city just needed to push back on us a little bit and cut, a little more than that. It's gonna take us time to hire people, so we would get to a point where I might have to freeze some of those hires. So if we were looking to hire, again, a certain grade level teacher, and we hadn't gone through that process yet, I would reach out to that principal and say, we have to pause right now because we're not sure where we're gonna be. But right now, I feel fairly comfortable. Linda, do you feel okay with that?
I do.
Any questions? Any of that?
So do you need us to make a motion?
Please.
I entertain a motion for Kyle to go, or,
Yeah, just gotta find the right,
yeah,
what's it called, the hiring plan, is that it?
hiring, job posting?
Yeah, so I recommend that we allow Kyle and the administrative team to post positions as needed. Make that recommendation to the full board. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move that to the full board, right?
Should we add from the retirement and resignation list? Did you?
That's where we would start. Yeah, that's exactly. Where do we
I
hire
don't know
those
if you
positions?
needed that
I
specific.
don't think we need that specific though, yeah.
Well, the intent is that.
Okay.
Vacant, or upcoming vacancies due to retirement and resignation.
Yeah, the strategy they use is up to them. So, yeah.
Motion's been made and seconded, discussion? All those in favor, move to the board?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Just one favor, we had a technical difficulty earlier, so in other, Mr. Toddy was unable to ask the board for his proposal. So at this time, if you'd indulge,
Absolutely.
Mr. Toddy?
Mr. Toddy? Hello, Mr. Toddy, you there?
Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me a little better than I've been able to hear you all.
Dave, stop for a minute.
Hold on one second, Dave. We could hear you more than loudly.
Well, good.
Oh, you know what it's doing again, Dave? It's going actually through
The voice through
It's
the
going
ceiling.
through the ceiling now instead of the man in the mic.
On the touchpad next to the door, there is a volume control.
So loud. Voice of the ceiling.
Give that a go.
All right, how's that? Am I sounding a little better?
A little
Yeah.
louder.
A
Yes.
little bit better, guys, now we gotta turn you up a little bit.
Go, one more time.
Okay. You guys are a little quiet to me, but, is that working? Excellent.
That's better.
I hope that we prioritize the budget by volume. So what I was hoping to speak to you about in other, and I've been kind of glitchy on what I can hear, so if I need to repeat anything, please let me know and bear with me. The internet connection in my house isn't the best. So in other, what I wanted to remind the personnel committee of was that back in December, athletic director Hebert and I made a presentation about athletic department needs to the 5-year committee, and the top 2 things on that list were to replace the storage building that we lost. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in building committee. But the other one was about staffing. Right now we have 3 full-time grounds employees, and a better name for them might be utility employees, because they don't just do grounds, they do everything. They're the first line of, if a custodian calls out sick, it's a grounds guy that goes to cover it. When there's snow removal, it's a grounds guy that goes to cover it. When there's deliveries that need to be made, the grounds guys are doing that. They are the relief pitchers, they're just doing everything, utility players. So I have some comps for you in Londonderry, which is a similar sized school district. They run 3 full-time grounds guys year-round, but they bring in another full-time person during the summer. And they don't do their own snow removal, so their winter needs are a little bit less. We do all of our own snow removal, so our needs are consistent throughout the year. Dover has 4 full-time employees. Portsmouth has 4 full-time employees, and Exeter has 4 full-time employees. The last 2 lead grounds people that left the district left because they were overworked. They made no doubt about it. They were just being asked to do too much. In the calendar period from November to November last, we put 625 hours on the grounds guys. I'm sure some of that is welcome. I'm sure some of it's not. The way the union agreement works, when we ask them for overtime, they need to do it. And sometimes that's a great inconvenience for them. It's not really something they want to do. I'm sure if we brought in another person, there would still be some overtime, because some of that revolves around when the snow falls, but certainly a lot of that 625 would go away if we had another person. So just now that we're here at budget season, I wanted to bring what I brought to the 5-year committee to the personnel committee and begin a discussion about the possibility of adding a full-time grounds position to maintenance department in the next fiscal year.
Anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Philip?
I think it will be considered, Dave.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much for your consideration.
All right. Thank you for holding on. All right. Cal, do you have any non-public?
Non-personnel.
No? Okay. There's no non-public. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.